Good afternoon, everyone. My name is May Valdez from the Cold Chain Innovation Hub of the Global Partnership for improving the implementation of the food cold chain in the Philippines. This project is funded by the Global Environment Facility and implemented by the United Nations Industrial Development Organizations and SHECO Japan, together with the Department of Environment and Natural Resources and the Technical Education and Skills Development Authority. The cold chain sector is a crucial industry for just transition towards a low carbon economy. Therefore, a coherent policy environment for industry is vital as new low carbon innovations and technologies will be available in the market in the coming years. It is high time for policymakers and key stakeholders to discuss and collaborate on efforts that will advance sustainable, low carbon food cold chains that improve food safety and food security in the Philippines. In line with the World Refrigeration Day on June 26, this forum will discuss the Philippine food cold chain sector in light of transitioning to green and low carbon technologies. This forum aims to increase awareness of key stakeholders on the government's directions in advancing sustainable low carbon food cold chains and explore synergies in government policies and programs that promote sustainable food cold chains. This forum seeks to answer the following questions. What are the government's policies, plans, and programs that will have an effect on the development of the food cold chain industry? How can these policies support the industry in leapfrogging to low carbon technologies? And what are the gaps and opportunities? How can collaboration be increased among policymakers, implementing agencies, and the industry to ensure low carbon development in the cold chain industry? So we hope to answer those questions as we go over the discussions for today. Each speaker will have a 15-minute presentation and we will request them to stay for a question and answer later on in the program. This will be the program flow for today. So right now, I'm doing the introductions. And then the first presenter will be Mr. Anthony Dizon from SICAP, who will discuss the status of the Philippine food cold chain industry. Then we will have Director Raquel Echage from the Board of Investments. We will be also having Director Patrick Aquino from the Energy Utilization and Management Bureau of the Department of Energy. We will also have Mr. Onofre Escota to discuss the Montreal Protocol and what it means for promoting low carbon refrigeration. He is from the DNREMB Philippine Ozone Desk. We will also be discussing the Palamigan ng Bayan. This is one of the government's flagship program on improving the food cold chain, to be discussed by Attorney Maria Asuncion Jasmin H. De Los Santos from the Port Operation and Services Department of the Philippine Ports Authority. And then lastly, we will be having a presentation by Engineer Hilda Garibay, the program lead of the FCC project, discussing how we can go forward in exploring synergies in these government policies together with key stakeholder and industry members. This will be followed by a question and answer and synthesis and closing. So we're expecting to finish at around 5:30 p.m. But in our experience, most of the time we go beyond that because of the richness of the discussion from the audience. So we hope you stick around throughout this forum. Okay, so now without further ado, I will start the program and we will proceed with our first presenter to discuss the status of the Philippine cold chain industry. He is the president of the Cold Chain Association of the Philippines. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Anthony Dizon.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, May. And thank you to the Cold Chain Innovation Hub Philippines for the invitation to speak before you at this forum today. We always welcome opportunities to be able to discuss the status and the prospects of the cold chain industry in the Philippines because we have consistently felt that the cold chain industry is a particular sector that will always have a positive outlook in terms of growth because the industry sector that we cover also pertains to one of the most important components of daily life, which is food. Today, I have been assigned to discuss the status and the future prospects of the cold chain industry in the Philippines. So, in the interest of material time, I think we will go straight to the point. Our first slide will show our industry situation there at the present day, which indicates that the total industry capacity estimate around the country is about 500,000 pallet possessions, which in the industry language translates to roughly also 500,000 metric tons of holding capacity. In addition to the current inventory of cold storage capacity today, we also know that there are projects that are currently in the pipeline or even already undergoing commissioning. We have about 30,000 new pallets that will come on stream later in the year in Luzon, and another 20,000 pallet positions that will come on stream hopefully before the end of the year. Just to give you a bird's eye view of the capacity distribution of the 500,000 pallet possessions, we have in Luzon, including NCR, a total of 320,000 pallet possessions. We have 130,000 pallet possessions in Visayas and another 100,000 pallet possessions in Mindanao. Just to give you an idea of the distribution of the capacities around the country, in Luzon and as well as the other parts of the country, the predominant utilization of the cold chain space or the cold storage space is still in meat and meat products. As we all know, the predominant categories of meat products in the Philippines would really be pork and to some extent beef. In addition, about 25% of the capacity in Luzon and the Visayas are also allocated for storage of poultry and poultry products. In Mindanao, the utilization rate for poultry is about 15%. In the category of fish and other marine products, Mindanao has the bigger share of utilization, predominantly because the tuna and sardine industries are located in several locations around Mindanao. In the fruits and vegetable sector, in Luzon, predominantly the vegetable usage is allocated for onions, which are principally located in Nueva Ecija. And in Mindanao, correspondingly, the 15% utilization for fruits is intended for bananas. And the other product categories, including dairy, would constitute about 5% of capacity utilization. Okay, having said that, this is how the industry looks today, and we would like to correlate the position of the industry to what is the general outlook for the country in the short to medium term. We say that in general, food will continue to be the primary expenditure item under the next normal. Even historically, it is of common knowledge that the food component of the usual Filipino household budget is never less than 50%. So therefore, even as we move to the next normal, as we would have it hopefully after the post-pandemic era, we still expect that food will still continue to be the first and primary expenditure item. Secondly, the local production of pork, I think everybody is familiar with the situation. The local production of pork has been affected by the Asian swine fever for the past 18 months or so. And as per the coordination with the government authorities concerned, we do not expect that this phenomenon will be addressed or corrected within the next 12 months. So therefore, the supply of the principal meat product that is consumed in the Philippines will still need to be supported from imports. Next, because of the influence of the pandemic over the past 15 months or so, people have learned to shift their preferences to those that are either readily available or that may present an economic advantage, or for that matter, have a longer shelf life in order to uh, insulate people from having to market progressively and often because of the inability to go out because of health protocol restrictions. Next, the nuances of the world market may also make it necessary for the Philippine agribusiness sector to institute a directional shift in policies and programs. What are these nuances? What are these developments? As you may have seen in the news, China is now emerging as a net importer of agricultural produce. This is primarily because of the fact that China has also been largely affected by ASF. China's consumption of rice has now overtaken, I think, has now overtaken its capability to feed its population, and therefore China is now becoming to turning out to be a net importer of agricultural produce. Next, it used to be that the supply of buffalo meat from India was intended to be for the utilization only of the developing world, because buffalo meat is a less expensive substitute for the need for nutritional supply, for the nutritional benefits that were provided by beef. It used to be that this was the situation, but today we see an emerging trend where even Middle Eastern countries are now competing for the supply of buffalo meat. And as a result of this development, the price of buffalo meat has also escalated significantly. Similarly, because of the existing restrictions on the availability of MDM, or what we more popularly know as mechanically deboned meat, which is the primary raw material extender for the production of processed meat products. Uh, the prices of MDM, the import prices of MDM have escalated uh, exponentially over the past 12 months. And we do not see that this is going to reverse anytime soon, because the avian flu restrictions in Europe and the other sources of MDM have continued today. And therefore, having recognized these uh, influences on the Philippine agribusiness sector, therefore, there is now an identified need that we may have to develop new strategies to strengthen domestically sourced food supply. We do not aspire for total self sufficiency, but we simply want to be able to achieve a higher level of domestic sourcing, if only to reduce our dependence on import sourcing, and also insulate us to some extent from the vagaries of the international market. Secondly, because of, as mentioned, because uh, ex- the additional materials that are needed for processing of food products have now been affected by the developments in the international market, it may actually be necessary for the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Science and Technology to develop substitute materials for processing inputs. What are we talking about here? Maybe we need to substitute plant-based materials for animal-based materials that are used for processing inputs. And third, we need to recognize market opportunities with competitive advantage. What are we saying here? We have taken note of the information that a group of entrepreneurs in the Philippines have actually successfully exported okra to South Korea. This is a classic example of what Philippine agribusiness can do if we capitalize on the areas where we may have a competitive advantage. So, translating all these influences and the factors into specific needs and specific opportunities for the cold chain industry. First, we say the need for cold chain capacity should continue to grow as a function of population growth, economic recovery, and consumption preferences. However, we need to give special attention to the continuing development of e-commerce platforms. Why do we mention this? Because apparently the emergence of e-commerce platforms has changed consumer procurement habits, and which, to our mind, develops new opportunities for cold chain business activities because e-commerce platforms necessarily will necessarily entail the use of controlled temperature environments. And therefore, this opens up an opportunity for the cold chain industry. However, the industry growth needs to be aligned with corresponding growth in production capacities and capabilities around the country, with emphasis on technology transfer, commercial farming, partnerships, and so on. We cannot continue to be dependent on imports. We cannot continue to define or describe ourselves as backyard and make the mistaken notion of identifying backyard as backward. And third, we cannot continue to be inward looking. We always have to be on the lookout for new market opportunities because understandably the Philippine market by itself is not large enough to develop economies of scale in all food categories, and therefore there is a necessity to combine domestic marketing efforts with exploratory efforts also to establish a foothold in export markets. Third, industry growth also needs to be cognizant of attendant needs for power supply, environmental compliance, logistic support, etc. Uh, More emphasis on the area of logistic support, knowing, for example, for of course, that the Philippines is archipelagic and therefore logistics will continue to be a challenge unless the supporting infrastructure for the logistics activity is present. And of course, we also need to emphasize that the cold chain industry will always be dependent on reliable and dependable power supply, and therefore, power supply will always be an influencing factor in making investment decisions in cold chain infrastructure. So here we now would like to draw specific examples of where the opportunities lie in cold chain development. The Department of Agriculture has already identified several agro-industrial hubs that they have started to develop in different parts of the country, and it would be very useful for the private sector and even uh, international partnerships to take a look at the opportunities that are available in these new agro-industrial hubs. We have one in New Clark City, which focuses on the development of aquaculture and fruit and vegetable industry. We have another one that has been initiated by the local government unit of Taguig, which also focuses on the horticultural aspect of agribusiness. And we have several projects that have been initiated by the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources for fish port development. What are the other examples that we can point to? We have actually received invitations from the local government of Davao City to participate in the development of the Davao Food Terminal. This is a very extensive and expansive project that has been initiated by the LGU of Davao City, and we look forward to the cold chain industry to be able to participate to whatever extent is feasible and practical to support the food development industry in Davao City. There is also a project that has been initiated by JICA, the Japan Institute for Cooperation Agency, International Cooperation Agency, that studies the steps in the vegetable value chain. We expect to participate actively in this project to also determine the role that the cold chain industry can play in improving the value for the vegetable industry and translating into economic benefits for the vegetable farmers around the country. And last but not least, we are proud to inform everybody that the Cold Chain Association of the Philippines has been partnered into a program that was initiated by the U.S. Agency for International Development, which identifies 8 particular locations around the country that could benefit from the introduction and development of cold chain practice. These are the cities of Batangas, Cagayan, Iloilo, Zamboanga, General Santos, Legazpi, Puerto Princesa, and Tagbilaran. We hope to contribute actively to the realization of the programs that will be developed in these locations. However, the development of the cold chain industry will not be without the corresponding challenges. There are challenges that have been with us since day one, since time immemorial, and we are working as actively as we can to be able to overcome these challenges. First, we have to understand the investment climate. Number one, we have received expressions of interest from companies from different parts of the world for them to create a presence in the Philippines. But unfortunately, these expressions of interest have not materialized, mainly because of the constitutional restrictions on foreign investment in certain industry areas. We understand that there are efforts in the different government agencies concerned to be able to overcome these restrictions, and we are eagerly waiting for developments along this line for us to be able to capitalize on the easing of these restrictions to promote international investments in the industry in the Philippines. Second, supply chain concerns. We have always said that the operative word for supply chain is supply. And we have even made it a clear message to our partners in the Board of Investments that the cold chain can never be taken in isolation. The cold chain will always have to be taken in conjunction with the industry areas that it works with and that it services. And therefore, the key word that concerns us is the availability of supply, because without the supply, the cold chain cannot be effective. Next, if you get to the point where you are now determined to start to get involved in the cold chain industry, one of the watch out points would really be the cost of real estate. Because any investment in cold chain infrastructure will need to be real estate intensive. We also need to understand the impact of the real estate component on the overall investment profile of an investment in cold chain infrastructure. Next, we also have to inform you, albeit grudgingly, that the cold chain industry is also a highly regulated industry. We have to comply with regulations from practically every government agency that has anything to do with environmental compliance, with with energy utilization, with hazard analysis and critical points, compliance, and so on and so forth, the regulatory impositions of the government agencies involved in the production, distribution, and consumption of food products. And then, when you finally get to operate, you have to underscore the cost of doing business because the cold chain, any activity in the cold chain sector will be highly dependent on reliable and economically costed power, and therefore that will contribute immensely to the cost of doing business. And so we have to understand that first, you may need to locate your investment in an area where power is available, and second, your power availability may have to come at a reasonable cost. Next, again, is the ease of doing business. As I was referring to earlier, because the industry is heavily regulated, there are concerns that will always come about as a result of having to navigate the industry landscape and complying with all the regulatory compliances that are imposed on the industry. As a closing statement, let me just say that undoubtedly the growth prospects for the cold chain industry remain positive, if only as a function of the traditional factors. Examples: population growth, economic development, etc. However, the optimism will still need to be calibrated to ensure responsiveness and balance between capacity and demand. It is also worth mentioning the operative words that describe the landscape of our industry, namely supply as a prerequisite to supply chain effectiveness, and post harvest as the descriptive for the cold chain industry. These operative words will shape the future of the food cold chain in the country in the days to come. I hope that the presentation has been useful. We will stay around to answer any questions later on in the program. Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dizon, for giving us an overview of the status, trends, and challenges of the cold chain industry. For the audience, if you have questions for Mr. Dizon, kindly type in the Q&A box below the screen. In the meantime, Mr. Dizon may also type his responses to your queries in that same box. We will address all questions later on in our program, so please stick around. Okay, so now we will proceed with our second presentation on the Philippine Cold Chain Roadmap. This will be presented by Director Raquel Echage from the Resource-Based Industry Services of the Board of Investments. Director Echage, the screen is yours.
Thank you, May. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I'd like to thank first the organizer of this very important event, the Culture Innovation Hub of the Philippines and its partners in UNIDO. And also, I'd like to say hi to our colleagues in the private sector, especially the Culture Association of the Philippines, headed by Mr. Dizon, our colleagues in government, DOE, DNR, and PPA, who are also presenters today. My task now is to present the Philippine Cold Chain Industry Roadmap, the government policies and interventions that were made by particularly by the BOI and the DTI. So in 2020, we launched the Philippine Cold Chain Industry Roadmap. We note that cold chain is really an integral part of the value chain development, as presented by Mr. Dizon. Is actually a very important part of the whole value chain of agriculture, not only agriculture but only non-food sector. The industry also is a support industry to various commodities like fish, meat, dairy, fruits and vegetables, even non-food like drugs, medicines, and electronic sector. And the critical role that the cold chain industry is playing right now, particularly during this pandemic, is food safety and, of course, food security. But in the roadmap, it was found out that about 60%, only 60% of the agricultural food products are being passed through the cold chain facilities in the country. Now, just to tell you the industry mission and vision, in the roadmap, you'll notice that there are three important factors, important key vision in the roadmap or of the industry. For example, the industry would like to be a champion for food safety, a recognized benefactor to agribusiness development, and a vital link in the supply chain sector. Uh, it it wants to develop the supply chain in the underserved areas and push industry clustering, for example, to achieve a resilient supply of essential products like what was presented by Mr. Dison earlier. It's a challenge also that we need to know the agricultural supply that will go into the cold chain storage facility. And of course, the industry would like also to have an inclusive growth uh, because of course the beneficiaries of the cold chain industry is also the farmers that produce the food that we eat, and that will come into the cold chain facility. The mission of the industry is to be a cohesive, functional, and collaborative network of cold chain stakeholders imbued with the highest operating principles and standards, compliant with government policies and regulations, and responsive to the needs of the Filipinos. So of course, there's mention already of food safety and resilience and the ability of the households to keep with a certain level of well-being and notwithstanding the shocks and stresses. And we want also to promote, the mission also is to promote investments. For example, investments in the through private public partnership or the PPP with the local government units, and of course PPP with with the other producers, especially in the underserved areas where scale has yet to be reached. And the industry also want to ensure longer life of food commodities in distant communities. Probably refrigerated trucks can address perishable goods, but of course in the run this will not be enough. And we want to also encourage industry players to adopt greener technology to comply with government policies and regulations. For example, installing energy efficient insulation systems into the equipment. Some of the challenges, Mr. Dison already mentioned all of the challenges, but these are only some when we were doing the roadmap. Of course, there's already mention of the power, which is the biggest cost item at 25 to 35% of the total production cost. Electricity supply reliability is also a major challenge, especially in some areas in Mindanao or in Zamboanga. And the cold chain storage limited business model will be vulnerable to the planned phase out of the hydrochlorofluorocarbons by 2040. So these are only some, and Mr. Dison already presented all of the industry issues and challenges earlier. Now in the roadmap, there are a milestone that needs to be done or undertaken in the next 3 years. But of course, due to the pandemic, we can push forward further these milestones to probably up to 2023 or 2024. So there are five goals, five go-to goals or agenda. For example, there are five investments in cold storage facilities, maybe two in Luzon, one in Visayas area, and two in Mindanao. but of course this is not exactly the numbers that we want to produce, but depending on the investors that would come in, we would want, of course, more investors in these areas. uh, and then five investments in cold chain logistics services, probably investments in trucking services, the reefer vans, internet connection or the telecommunications, because we want advanced technology for our cold chain facilities, improvement in the roads. Of course, the government is now doing its role in improving infrastructure for the business to come in, and new road access to the cold chain and storage warehouses. In terms of policies, we want some reforms. There could be five or more of policy reforms. For example, a delivery schedule, the accreditation and documentary requirements, on-time issuance of the COMI by NMIS, data information access, and compliance to food safety regulation, which is already a continuing program. And during the after the launching of the roadmap in December 2020, the Board of Investment had convened the National Cold Chain Committee, or the NCQ, we call it the NCQ, in March 2021. We formally created this NCQ, which is being co-chaired by BOI and the Department of Agriculture, with Vice Chairman from Cold Chain Association of the Philippines. So the secretariat would be the Board of Investments, specifically the Resource-Based Industry Service. And the group one plan to create four more TWGs that will be the workforce of the committee. The TWGs would be divided into four thematic areas. For example, one TWG for policy reforms and data information and communications, one TWG for cold chain services, all issues, investments in the cold chain services, and of course, we want to separate logistics from the cold chain services because it's also a big subsector of the cold chain industry, and another TWG for food and drug safety education. So all the five sectors would be addressed or covered by this by the whole work of the committee. We will cover meat, fishery, dairy, fruits and vegetables, and non-food products. Another policy intervention of government is the newly signed RA number 11534, or the incentives being provided under the Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentives for Enterprises Act, or CREATE for short. And since the CREATE would be publishing a Strategic Investment Priority Plan, or SIPP, to be headed by the BOI. But in the meantime, that it is not yet publicized or not available yet, the 2020, or the existing Investment Priorities Plan of the BOI, will be the transitional SIPP. So in terms of the investments in cold chain activities, for example, uh, cold chain storage, the warehousing, the blast freezing, and other agricultural support services in infrastructures, it will be under the agriculture, fishery, and forestry listing of the 2020 investment priorities plan. So if the project would be qualified based on the guidelines provided under the 2020 IPP, then it could be qualified also for incentives under the CREATE. Later, I will show you what are the incentives under CREATE. Another relevant sector that can be given incentives uh, to support the cold chain industry is the manufacture of machinery and equipment. We are really promoting local fabrication or manufacture of machinery and equipment. If we have qualified investors or qualified projects for this, then we can register it under the Board of Investments and qualify for the incentives. Please note that our general policy really is to for the registered projects to use or utilize new technology, not really modern or very new, but those that will be using new or brand new equipment, so that we could address pollution, and we could be minimizing emissions from this equipment. And also another activity that can be provided with incentives under CREATE is the infrastructure and logistics activities or projects, including the LGU or the local government public-private partnership projects. That also includes an integrated logistics project. So those that will include delivery of goods, not only storage of goods, but also delivery would be falling under this integrated logistics. Now, under CREATE, there will be three classification of industries that will be qualified for incentives. Tier 1, the 2020 IPP, all those activities in the 2020 IPP are considered as Tier 1, as under Tier 1. When we evaluate this project, we look at the potential or the characteristic of the project as in uh, that shall or could either be a potential for creating job. There are sectors, of course, that have bigger job generation than the others. Or could that sector be addressing some market failures resulting in under provision of basic goods and services? For example, housing. We have a big backlog for housing, so we can also register housing projects. Third one is the value creation through innovation, upgrading, and moving up the value chain. And we are in this particular instance, we want to promote those activities that would provide higher value to our products or services. Another is essential support to sectors critical to industrial development. So for cold chain storage, for integrated logistics, this is an essential support to sectors critical to industrial development. Agribusiness is critical to industrial development. Also drugs and medicines, particularly vaccines right now. So we can qualify cold chain storage, warehousing, blast freezing under this category or classification. And another is the emerging activity or projects owing to potential comparative advantage. So any of these five could be used in evaluating projects for Tier 1, under Tier 1 of CREATE. So for Tier 2, the Tier 1 activities could be upgraded to Tier 2. For example, since we don't have yet an SIPP, we can qualify and evaluate and approve the projects under Tier 1, but we can always recommend that it could be upgraded to Tier 2 because this Tier 2 have higher incentives, particularly the ITH. So we can always recommend whether the project could merit uh, being under Tier 2. For example, if the activity it will be producing supplies, parts, components, and immediate services that are not locally produced but are critical to industrial development, or if it's an import substituting activity, including the crude oil refining. So that's how it was defined in the law. Or from Tier 1, it could be considered or recommended to Tier 3. What are these activities? These are R&D with significant value added, higher productivity, improved efficiency, breakthroughs in science and health, and high-paying jobs. Or if the activity would generate new knowledge and intellectual property registered or licensed in the Philippines, if it will commercialize uh, licensed intellectual property or registered with IPO or DOST or other R&D agencies. Commercialization also of patents, industrial designs, copyrights, and utility models would be under Tier 3. Highly technical manufacturing, and those that are critical to the structural transformation of the economy and require substantial catch-up efforts. So these are now being studied by the Board of Investments in collaboration with other investment promotion agencies like BCDA, SBMA, CDC, so that we can come up with a very comprehensive strategic investment priority plan. So the SIPP will already include the guidelines or limitations or whatever incentives that the project or the sector would be needing under CREATE. So these are the menu of incentives for domestic market enterprises. There's a separate menu also or higher incentives for export. Since cold chain is a domestic market activity, so I'll just concentrate on the market domestic incentives. For example, the qualified projects in cold chain, in logistics, in PPPs could be qualified for income tax holiday of 4 to 7 years, depending on the location and enhanced deductions of 5 years after the ITH. Later, I'll show you a slide about it. Duty exemption on importation of capital equipment, raw materials, spare parts, or accessories. So on the right side of the screen are the list of the enhanced deductions that are available for the cold chain industry. For example, you can uh, deduct add a depreciation allowance in terms of the buildings and the machinery and equipment, 10% for buildings and additional 20% for machinery and equipment. If the project is more of labor intensive, there will be 50% additional deduction on labor expense if you employ more people. And if the project would be on more of R&D, doing R&D, then 100% of the expenses for R&D could be added as a deduction. And training, if you are into R&D and into training, also 100% of the expenses for training could be deducted. Power, cold chain storage is a power intensive activity, so 50% would be added as additional deduction on power expense. And if you are into manufacturing, of course, cold chain is not into manufacturing, so this incentive is not available for cold chain storage. And if the project would incur losses in the first 3 years, then enhanced net loss carryover would be applicable to the project. Now here's the how incentives, particularly the ITH, would be applied to a project. For example, if you are located in the National Capital Region or the NCR, and you are qualified or classified under Tier 1, then you'll be entitled to the 4 years income tax holiday and 5 years of the enhanced deduction that I mentioned earlier. So now, if, for example, we evaluated your project as under Tier 1, but we see merit in uh, qualifying it or upgrading it to Tier 2, then the project would be entitled to 5 years ITH instead of the 4 years. Or if from Tier 1 we recommended it to be Tier 3, then you have additional 2 years incentives, ITH or income tax holiday, and the 5 years enhanced deduction. So for those projects locating in metropolitan areas or areas contiguous and adjacent to NCR, for example, Metro Cebu, Metro Davao, and other areas that may be later declared as a metropolitan area, then the incentive would be under Tier 1 would be 5 years ITH, under Tier 2, 6 years ITH, under Tier 3, 7 years. So the higher the tier, the higher the income tax holiday. And for all other areas outside of NCR and outside of the metropolitan areas, then you have the maximum incentives. For Tier 1, it would be 6 years ITH. For Tier 2, 7 years ITH. And Tier 3, 7 years ITH also. And similar 5 years in enhanced deduction depending on the applicable enhanced deduction for your project. So I think that is my last slide. So I'll stay also later to entertain questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Ichage, for presenting an overview of the Philippine Cold Chain Roadmap and for also sharing what incentives the industry can avail. Indeed, there are many in store for the cold chain industry. And I imagine there will be lots of questions later on. So for the audience, if you have questions, I encourage you to type it first in the Q&A box located below your screen. And then later on, we will be going through that before we end our program. We will be having a Q&A portion. Okay,
Thank
so
you,
we will,
May.
thank you, Director Echage. So now we will proceed with our third presentation on pursuing sustainable cold chains through the energy efficiency law. We will be playing a pre-recorded presentation by Director Patrick Aquino of the Energy Utilization and Management Bureau of the Department of Energy. Director Aquino will be with us later for a live Q&A.
We
Okay.
extend our appreciation to the Global Partnership for the Improvement of the Food Cold Chain in the Philippines for the opportunity to present in this forum. For the Department of Energy, this is Pursuing Sustainable Cold Chains through the Energy Efficiency and Conservation EEC Act. In the Philippines, Republic Act number 11285 or the EEC Act is the blueprint for energy efficiency and conservation. It institutionalizes and enhances energy consumption and grants incentives to energy efficiency projects. Under the EEC Act, energy-intensive sectors in the building or commercial, industrial, and transport are classified as designated establishments based on annual energy consumption. Certain obligations attach depending on the classification. Designated establishments have an annual energy consumption of at least 100,000 kilowatt-hour equivalent. The obligations of designated establishments include the integration of energy management systems into their business operations. Certification is encouraged but not required. Designated establishments are obligated to engage the services of an Energy Conservation Officer ECO for Type 1 and Energy Manager EM for Type 2. To date, the requirement is for the registration with certification to begin once the DOE issues the certification processes. There is also an obligation to notify the DOE of any changes in the ECO and EM within 10 working days from occurrence. The conduct of energy audits once every 3 years are also required for designated establishments. Recognized energy audits are those done by DOE-registered energy service companies or ESCOs or a DOE-certified energy auditor. Energy audit results are to be submitted to the DOE. EEC Forms 3 and 4 are annual submission requirements for designated establishments. The annual deadline is 15 of April. EEC Form number 1 is for the registration of energy managers for Type 2 designated establishments, while EEC Form 2 is for the registration of energy conservation officers for Type 1 designated establishments. For the cold chain industry, EEC Forms 3 and 4 would cover disaggregated information from the stationary cold storage facility, mobile trucks, passenger and cargo ship cold storage, and air transport cold storage. EEC form requires backtracking of available information to at most 5 previous years. Designated establishments are also obligated to implement energy efficiency and renewable energy projects. Examples of these projects include vapor absorption system, shifting to more efficient and natural refrigerants, the use of variable speed drives, deployment of electric vehicles for hauling, among others. To facilitate the submission of reports, kindly scan the QR code for the forms or follow the website. Additional information is also available in the DOE website. From the energy perspective, there are opportunities for energy efficiency and conservation in the cold chain sector. In fisheries, for example, from the fishing vessel, transport, manufacturing, retail, and household levels. This is the short term of the roadmap for cold chain industry from the energy perspective. Starting with the compliance with MC 2020-05-001, inputs to the National Energy Consumption Database, and the development of the Minimum Energy Performance MEP for cold chain. These activities would be supported by fiscal incentives such as income tax holiday, duty-free importation, and non-fiscal incentives and technical assistance. These would be your awards and recognition. EEC project financing can also be obtained from the Land Bank, Development Bank of the Philippines, and the Bank of the Philippine Islands. Likewise, energy service companies or ESCOs can be tapped. At this point, we present other relevant issuance affecting cooling and refrigeration. These are twin issuances of the Philippine Energy Labeling Program, PELP, and the Minimum Energy Performance for Products, MEPP. The MEPP sets the minimum energy performance for the sale, lease, and import of energy-consuming products. PELP, on the other hand, guides on the energy consumption for air conditioners, refrigerating appliances, television sets, and lighting products. PELP covers refrigerating appliances with net volume capacity of 113 liters to up to 600 liters. These are refrigerators that are manual defrost and frost-free, and refrigerator-freezer combinations that are manual defrost and frost-free. MEPP for refrigerating appliances is the energy efficiency factor or EEF of 200 for single door, 230 for two-door manual defrost, and 180 frost-free. The table shows the EEF range for the energy label performance. The higher the rating, the more efficient the refrigerator. PELP tasks responsibilities to manufacturers, importers, and distributors to register the energy consumption product, print and attach the energy label, regularly update the product information. Energy label display includes online trading, cooperate in the conduct of enforcement, monitoring verification activities, and annual submission of sales inventory. PELP tasks retailers to attach the energy label, present the label visibly, including in online trading, and cooperate during monitoring and verification activities. For more information or clarification, you may reach us through our email, Facebook, telephone numbers, and the DOE website. Thank you for your kind attention.
And that's the pre-recorded presentation of Director Aquino from the EUMB. As mentioned, he will be with us live later during the question and answer. So please stand by with your questions, or you may type directly in your Q&A box to be answered later. So just a quick overview of the presentations that we had. First, we had the presentation from Mr. Dizon of CCAP, which gave us an overview of the status, trends, and challenges of the cold chain sector. And then it was followed by a presentation by Director Echage from the Board of Investments, which presented the incentives in store for the industry as through the CREATE law. And before this, we had Director Aquino in a pre-recorded video discussing the energy efficiency law. So now we see that both the BOI and the DOE are in tune and are gearing towards promoting low carbon and energy efficient technologies in the cold chain through the CREATE law and the energy efficiency law, respectively. And now to present an overview of the Montreal Protocol, another policy that promotes low carbon, green technologies, green refrigeration. Mr. Onofre Escota from the DNR Philippine Ozone Desk will have the presentation. Mr. Escota, the screen is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, May. Good afternoon, everyone. I will be presenting with regards to the implementation of the Montreal Protocol in the Philippines. So let me share first my screen, my presentation. Can you see it right now? Hello?
Yes. Yes, we
Thank
see.
you. Yes. As the start no, of the Philippines and the Montreal Protocol, we have signed the Montreal Protocol, or we have been a party to the Montreal Protocol last September 14, 1988. And we have ratified these conventions, the Vienna Conventions and the Montreal Protocol, on March 21, 1991. We also ratified all the 4 amendments and adjustments by the Montreal Protocol by 2006. Under this Montreal Protocol, Philippines is being assigned as the Article 5 country, or defined as developing country, whose annual consumption of controlled substances is less than 0.3 kilograms per capita. To give you the objective of the Montreal Protocol, is to phase out the consumption of ozone depleting substances. And based on this definition, the consumption is equivalent to import minus export plus production. In the case of the Philippines, we're not exporting and we are not producing. So our consumption is equivalent to importation. I just want to share with you the success so far, or the achievements so far of the Montreal Protocol. They are the one being rewarded as the most successful environmental agreements in the world. As you can see, from the 27.5 million square kilometers last 2006, it's now decreased to 16.4 million square kilometers and shrunk to 10 million square kilometers last September 2019. Philippine Ozone Desk actually has the one designated office of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, which is formerly the Montreal Protocol Secretariat, to act as the national coordinator for the implementation of the Montreal Protocol. It's also uh, designated as the National Ozone Unit of the Philippines. As per our commitment to the Montreal Protocol, the multilateral fund has provided us the institutional strengthening project to fund to provide us fund for the Article 5 countries in building and strengthening their capacity in the implementation of the Montreal Protocol and its amendments. So the overall objective of this ISP, or the institutional strengthening, is to continuously operate an effective and well-organized Philippine Ozone Desk as the national ozone unit to support the country's compliance and measures and other obligations under the Montreal Protocol. So our specific commitment is to strengthen the capacity of NOU and other stakeholders, and to ensure continuous enforcement of ODS regulations and licensing system, to control the importation, and to able to meet the sustained compliance with the Montreal Protocol, including the preparation of the implementation of the HCFC Patient Management Plan. Among major results, expected results and outputs is to capacitate the capacity of NOU stakeholder for both public and private sectors, and strengthen enforcement of ODS regulations, including licensing system and quota system, and monitor trade and report of ODS in order to meet and sustain the compliance of the Montreal Protocol, and manage accordance and agreed deliverables of other projects approved by MLM, and then develop HPMP Stage 2 report, continuous effective communication and awareness activities for general public, refrigeration, air conditioning sector, importers, and other Montreal Protocol obligations. Of course, a timely submits of mandatory annual data reporting to ozone and multilateral fund secretariats on the 2019 and 2020, on the year 2019 and 2020. The government sustains compliance and other required obligations as a party, the Montreal Protocol, and then we have a need also to provide the terminal and request and renewal request reports received and in accordance with the rules of the Executive Committee of the Multilateral Fund. With the achievements of the Philippines in the ozone layer protection, we have a policy and regulatory framework. We have established so far already, we have 3 department administrative order or the chemical control order for ozone depleting substances. These are DAO 2000-18, 2004-08, and DAO 2013-25 to the Republic Act 6969 Toxic Substances, Hazardous and Nuclear Waste Act of 1990. We have completed 94 ODS projects funded by the Multilateral Fund of the Montreal Protocol, which supports the conversion in selected industries during the refrigerant management plan, the National CFC phase-out plan, and the National Methyl Bromide phase-out strategy. So far, we already phased out all the ODS by 2010, except for HCFCs and methyl bromide in quarantine pre-shipment applications. We have also provided a technical training for staff from DNR, Bureau of Customs, service technician, academic, and public and private sectors. We also provided IEC campaigns to promote local efforts in the ODS phase-out and provision of equipment like refrigerant identifiers to Bureau of Customs, Land Transportation Office, and so forth. Also with recovery and recycling machines to RAC and MAC service centers or shops, even TESDA and accredited schools. So this is the set phase-out schedule provided by the Montreal Protocol. So we have CFCs, halon, carbon tetrachloride, methylchloroform, methyl bromide for non-quarantine pre-shipment application only, and hydrofluorocarbons. So far, we have already phased out the CFCs last January 1, 2010, halons last January 1, 1999, the carbon tetrachloride last January 1, 1996, the methylchloroform last January 1, 1996, and the methyl bromide in the non-quarantine shipment application last January 1, 2009. So we only are now remaining to phase out is the HCFC species. So far, this is the Philippine HCFC baseline consumption. The same with the National CFC phase-out plan and refrigerant management plan. Multilateral Fund, again, will be providing another assistance for the HCFC phase-out by having the Philippines HCFC phase-out management plan. So with regards to the baseline consumption that we need to phase out, we have established this HCFC baseline consumption. As you can see, we have a bulk importation of the HCFC 22, which has 67% of the baseline consumption, followed by 141B, which has 32%, and 1% from HCFC 123. The other HCFCs are negligible in their importations. So we have a total of 161.97 ODP tons. Based on our existing phase-out schedule of the HCFCs under the DAO 2013-25 or the revised regulations on the chemical control order for ozone to phase out ozone depleting substances. So by 2013, we have to freeze our baseline consumption, or the recorded baseline shall not be exceeded. And starting by 2015, we need to reduce 10% of our baseline consumption of the HCFCs. However, in the case of the Philippines, we are following the HPMP uh, projects. Since the HPMP provided the assistance on the foam sector, we have reduced our consumption only on the importation consumption of the HCFC 141B. That was on starting January 1, 2015. And by 2020, we have to reduce 35%. So the affected sectors here is the manufacturing of refrigeration air conditioning equipment using HCFC 22. By that year, the reduction of the 35% will be attributed to HCFC 22 only. And by 2025, the 67.5% reduction, although it is the affecting sector here are the chillers and fire extinguishing manufacturing. Still, however, the reduction will be taken from importation consumption of HCFC 1 to 3, the remaining consumption of HCFC 22, and the remaining consumption of HCFC 141B. Since the total importation history of the HCFC 123 is very small compared with 141B and HCFC 22. And by January 2030, we need to reduce the 97.5% of our baseline consumption. So all the three species will be reduced by 97.5%. And by that year, we need all our importation of HCFC blends will be prohibited. And by 2030 to 2040, 2.5%, or the remaining 2.5% from the 2030 to 2039 will be allowed only for servicing sector. And by 2040 is the complete phase out of HCFCs. So far, here is our consumption pattern with regards to HCFC from 2030 to 2020. So we exceeded our target from 35%. We have exceeded the 68.76 reduction last 2020. To give you the overview of the HCFC phase-out management plan, it is a mixed investment and the non-investment projects aim to phase out HCFC in different sectors. This is the same strategy with regards to phase out of the CFC during the national CFC phase out plan. In providing investment projects with and technical assistance to assist manufacturers in shifting to non-HCFC technologies, and also the non-investment projects to provide training, capacity building, policy, and regulatory support. So far, during the HCFC phase-out management plan stage 1, we have provided assistance to all the co-manufacturers. These are so far the manufacturers that given an assistance or change their technologies from HCFC 141B to non-HCFC 141B. Most of the technology here are new technology, are water blown, liquid carbon dioxide, and cyclopentane. These are the pictures of the provided equipments to those industries. We have also provided grant to all spray foam applicators. They have provided chemicals and also a Graco reactor equipment. This was given through a reimbursement. Also, we have during the HPMP, we have provided the training of staff from DNR, BOC, service technicians, academe, and public and private sectors. Again, IEC campaigns to promote local efforts in the LDS phase out and provisions of new uh, multi-refrigerant identifiers to Bureau of Customs and DNR. You can see here the new amendments that was given by that was agreed in the Kigali, Rwanda during the Kigali, Rwanda in 2016. The new amendment for the Montreal Protocol to pace down HFCs. The parties to the Montreal Protocol has reached an agreement last October 15, 2016 in Kigali, Rwanda to pace down HFCs. And the HFCs are commonly used as alternatives to ODS, which has a greenhouse, HFCs are also greenhouse gases, which has high global warming potentials from 12 to 14,800. As you can see, we have now added a new annex for the controlled substances of the Montreal Protocol, which is the Annex F, the Group 1 and Group 2 of HFCs. So it was adopted last October 16 to reduce emissions of a powerful greenhouse gases that could prevent 0.5 degrees Celsius of global warming by the end of this century, while continuing to protect the ozone layer. And this is the pace down schedule provided by the Montreal Protocol for Article 5 countries. And we are in the under Group 1. So our baseline years will be on the period of 2020-2022. And our baseline calculation will be average production consumption of HFC in 2020, 2021, and 2022, plus the 65% of HCFC baseline consumption. And we will be starting our base down schedule starting by 2024. Since we have to freeze our reductions of our baseline consumption, meaning not to exceed our baseline consumption starting 2024. And starting 2029, we have to reduce the 10% reduction of our baseline consumption of HFCs, and 30% by 2035, 50% by 2040, and 80% by 2045. So far, our updates with regards to ratification of the Kigali Amendment of the Philippines. We have completed our interagency working group meeting, and so far all the requested certificate of concurrences were provided by concerned government agencies. It is now with the DNR Secretary for his endorsement to the Department of Foreign Affairs, together with the supporting documents for the ratification of the Kigali Amendment to pace down HFCs. So, to give information about our HFC consumption from 2010 to 2020, so you can see it's still increasing, the importation of our HFCs, especially 134A, R404, R32, R410A. They are increasing right now, and the 227E and 236FA. In line with our commitment to the Kigali Amendment, we have to establish again to control the phase down of HFCs, which is the Chemical Control Order for HFC phase down. We have already conducted a public consultation on September 17, 2020, in collaboration with the enabling activities of UNIDO for the ratification of this Kigali Amendment. And we have already reviewed and evaluated and made some recommendations during the EMB Policy Technical Working Group. But it was also endorsed to the EMB Director for his final review, evaluation, and recommendations. So far, as an update, we have the EMB already endorsed it to the EMB Director. The EMB Director already endorsed it to the DNR policy for the review and evaluation. And they already set a meeting on June 30, 2021. With regards to available alternatives to HFCs in the Philippines, this was taken and provided during our Techno Forum last year. So, with regards to in the use of cleaning solvents or flushing agents as alternatives to HCFC 141B, they have already the Novec 73DE. It has 47 GWP. Also, the Option SF79, which is less than 5, also as cleaning agents or solvents. The N-propyl bromide, also as cleaning solvents. However, it has a safety issues because of its toxicity, together also with the trichloroethylene. We have also the Novec 1230 fire protection fluid in replacement to the HFC 236FA and HFC 227AA. And we have also the R600A, the isobutane, which has less than 1, used as for domestic refrigerators, but also had safety issues on flammability. The same with R290 as propane, which has also less than 1, uses as domestic air conditioning or transport and commercial refrigeration. The ammonia 717 or R717, which has 0 global warming potentials. It is being used in commercial refrigeration, especially in cold storage, mostly in Mindanao, and also in ice making. Yes, and the carbon dioxide, or the R744, which is 1 GWP, also uses for refrigeration and conditioning and for fire suppression, and also has safety concerns or issues because of its high pressure. We have also the HFO 1234YF. It has less than 1, uses for car air conditioning. And the R513A still has high GWP with 629.76. This is actually a drop-in replacement for refrigeration air conditioning. And HFO 1234ZE and HFO 1233ZD with 1 GWP, uses for chillers. That's all. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Escota. Now we proceed with our next presenter to discuss the Palamigan ng Bayan program. It is a collaboration of the Department of Agriculture, Department of Transportation, and the Department of Energy. Attorney Maria Asuncion Yasmin H. De Los Santos, Department Manager from the Port Operations and Services Department of the Philippine Ports Authority. She's with us now. Attorney De Los Santos, the screen is yours.
Okay. Thank you, May. Please allow me to share my screen. So, pleasant afternoon to all. The Palamigan ng Bayan project was initiated by the Department of Transportation under Secretary Arthur P. Tugade, and this was launched in December 2018. Under the project, refrigerated container vans or reefers are donated to communities with limited capability in transporting perishable goods or agri-fishery products. These reefers are beneficial to communities that rely on their fish, meat, and vegetable produce. The project enables the cost reduction of agri-products in local markets due to increased mobility and ease transportation. The reefer container vans donated keep the commodities at a regulated cool temperature, thus maintaining quality. They can be classified into two categories in terms of size: 20-footer and 40-footer reefers. All units are high-capacity electric reefers that can be plugged in to a power supply with 380 volts or 50 hertz or 450 volts or 60 hertz. General temperature setting ranges from -30 degrees centigrade to -5 degrees centigrade for frozen and -5.1 to 30 degrees centigrade for chilled. The reefers use 12 to 15 kilowatts of electricity in pull-down mode and 2.25 kilowatt during normal operations for an average of 2.8875 kilowatts per hour. With this, the cost of operating the reefer for 24 hours for 30 days would be at $14,586.95 or roughly $300. To strengthen the implementation of this project, DOTR entered a tripartite memorandum of agreement with the Department of Energy and the Department of Agriculture, or DOE, last 12 March 2021. These tripartite efforts were further supplemented by a joint memorandum circular signed by the three departments. As to the responsibilities of the parties, the DA was assigned to evaluate potential beneficiaries through the help of the regional field offices, as well as for the capacity building of the beneficiaries. DOE, on the other hand, will handle the installation of the reefers and will ensure that there will be adequate supply of electricity in the area in order to operate the reefers with assistance of distribution utilities in its recipient local government units or LGUs. The DTR, on its part, will source the reefer container vans from potential donors, usually shipping lines, and it will take charge of the transport and delivery of these reefers to the beneficiary areas with the help of its attached agencies, such as the Philippine Ports Authority or PPA, the Maritime Industry Authority or Marina, Cebu Port Authority, CPA, and the Philippine Coast Guard or the PCG. The project aims to reach out to the farmers and fisher folks from farmers and fisher folk cooperatives and associations, as well as agricultural higher educational institutions in partnership with the recipient LGU or LGUs. The project aims to achieve the following objectives. First, to stabilize the price and supply of agri-fishery products in support of the food resiliency program of the Department of Agriculture. Next, it aims to help farmers and fisher folks in selling their products at the best prices while providing affordable, safe, and nutritious food to consumers. This will be possible by maintaining the quality of agri-fishery products with the use of the reefer container vans for storage and during transport. It also aims to provide technical and other support services to local farmers and fisher folks, and to encourage continuing technology innovation through PPP, joint venture arrangements, and other relevant and related legal arrangements. Most importantly, the project aims to promote the use of refrigerated container vans as cold storage to store fresh fruits and vegetables, fish, meat products, other perishable goods and supplies to address concerns on food quality and productivity, as well as availability. All these initiatives under the project would not have been possible without the participation and the support of our donors, the Association of International Shipping Lines, MERS Philippines Incorporated, ONE, as well as the tripartite efforts of the DA, DOE, and DOTR. With our partnership, the DOTR has already donated reefer container vans to local communities in Luzon and Visayas. It has initially delivered reefer container vans to 7 LGUs in Luzon, specifically in Cagayan, Aurora, Bataan, Batangas, and Romblon. There are also 9 LGUs in the Visayas, which benefited from the project. This will be in Cebu, Iloilo, Leyte, Bohol, and Negros Oriental. To date, a total of 18 reefer container vans have been donated across the country. So let me take this opportunity to invite and encourage our partners present here and other interested stakeholders to be part of the Palamigan ng Bayan project. Together, let us help bolster the livelihood of our farmers and fisher folks, maintain the quality of agri-fishery products for the benefit of the Filipino consumers and producers. So for more information about the project, you may coordinate with our DOTR through the email as shown in the slide. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Attorney De Los Santos. Okay, so to sum up our presentations, we've had quite a few. Our first presenter was CCI-Hub, who presented about the trends, challenges of the cold chain industry, and then followed by the the Board of Investments, which presented the Philippine Cold Chain Roadmap. It was then followed by the EUMB presenting the Energy Efficiency Law and what it means for the cold chain industry. And then we had the DNR, who presented about the Montreal Protocol and how the government aims to promote low carbon refrigeration, which will of course affect the industry as well. And then we had the presentation of Attorney De Los Santos before this, which presented the Palamigan ng Bayan project, a tripartite initiative between DA, DOE, and DOTR that promotes the cold chain, especially in rural areas. So it also promotes food security and economic development. And I would just like to reiterate to the audience that if you have questions for our presenters, you may type in our Q&A box. We've had a few questions already, and we will go through that later on after the next presenter. So the next and the last presentation for today will be about the Global Partnership for Improving the Food Cold Chain in the Philippines. So this will be presented by Engineer Hilda Garibay, the project lead of the FCC project. Ms. Garibay, the screen is yours.
Okay, thank you, May. Good afternoon, everyone. So, to complement the government efforts in addressing the challenges of food security and its direction towards a low-carbon economy, and to support the industry in overcoming the barriers towards the cold chain advancement, such as the regulatory and policy barriers, market and financial barriers, capacity barriers, technical barriers, and awareness and information barriers, The United Nations Industrial Development Organization, or UNIDO, is implementing a project in the Philippines called the Global Partnership for Improving the Food Cold Chain in the Philippines. So let me give you a background what this project is all about. So it is funded by the Global Environment Facility, or GEP, amounting to $2 million US, plus co-financing by other institutions amounting to around $25 million US. The Department of Environment and Natural Resources is the government partner, while the executing partners are SHECO, Technical Education Skills Development Authority, or TESDA, and other financial institutions. The goal of the project is to identify, develop, and stimulate the development of low-carbon, energy-efficient refrigeration innovation technologies and business practices in the Philippines for use throughout the food cold chain, whilst increasing food safety and security. Through the project, it is aiming to establish a global partnership between the public sector, the private sector, and the financial institutions for promotion of investment and support of best available energy-efficient design technologies and practices transfer. The project will concentrate on the comprehensive transformation of the commercial, industrial, and transport refrigeration system. The project will achieve such objectives through the implementation of 3 substantive components and associated outputs. Component 1 is the policy and regulatory assessment on the use of low carbon and energy efficient technology within the food cold chain. This is under the responsibility of the DNR. So for updates for this component, the Interagency Technical Working Group meeting has been done and the brainstorming. The inception report was completed, and currently we are mapping the national laws and regulation all related to cold chain. For the component 2, awareness and capacity building on the use of energy efficient, climate friendly, and safe alternatives in the food cold chain. This is under the partner SHECO and the TESDA through the Cold Chain Innovation Hub. So we have already conducted number of webinars, technical training. So because of the situation, it is done through online. We have knowledge materials in our website, in our YouTube channels. And presently, that's what we are concentrating for, but we have more on the coming months. And then the component 3, technology transfer and established partnership among key stakeholders. This is under SHECO and TESDA through the Cold Chain Innovation Hub. So what is this Cold Chain Innovation Hub? The Cold Chain Innovation Hub is the official platform of the project. It will be served as the project's central ecosystem of technical resources, training, knowledge sharing, and stakeholder collaboration. Global network of stakeholders such as national, international technology suppliers, financial institution, government will be built under the CCI-Hub. So the technology showcase will be established, best-in-class system and components from around the globe presented virtually, as well as technology product example exhibited on site and used for education and training provided through the industry partnership. So the CCI-Hub will operate in 2 platforms, the online platform and the physical hub. So the physical hub is currently being readied in TESDA in Taguig. So in the coming months, we'll be announcing to you what will be the developments of this. We have already number of technology providers that are interested, that are signify interest to join the CCI-Hub to form a technology showcase. So, but for now, we can see all the knowledge materials again in our website. So let me share to you that presently we already communicating to our financial institution regarding the demo projects that will be supported by the project. The financial scheme is under studied right now. This will be available to the local industry, and then we will be calling in investors to will be supported by the project to go to the country to implement the technology that will be introduced to our CCI-Hub. So please, we're inviting you to subscribe to our CCI-Hub website for more updates and knowledge materials on, and then any news regarding our project. So thank you very much for that quick introduction of our project. I am with the other panels for some questions this afternoon. Thank you. May?
Thank you, Ms. Garibay, for that presentation, giving us an overview of what the Global Partnership for Improving the Food Cold Chain in the Philippines is. And now we are in the question and answer portion of the program. We are opening the floor for questions. You have the option to say your questions live. So as I see now in the question and answer tab, we have a couple of questions from Mr. Federico Figueroa. Are you still with us, Sir Figueroa? Would you like to say your question live? Mr. Figueroa, are you with us? Okay, so he presented a couple of questions here, but maybe I could start with his first question. I think this is addressed to Mr. Dizon. Okay, the first question is long-term customer wants to buy fresh and frozen products is a continual and conclusive process, not an end state. The dynamic is in the cold chain will change as population, consumption, income, and production continue to grow. And so what government intervention is required to sustain ongoing shift in consumer habits to buy fresh and frozen products in the cold chain industry rather than from traditional wet markets?
Well, thank you for the question. I mean, the Cold Chain Association of the Philippines has actually been doing continuing research on how to improve the supply chain for food distribution and taking into consideration the cultural circumstances that also pertain to the uh, consumption and procurement habits of the population. One of the ideas that I personally am working on is the possibility of providing controlled temperature conditions in the wet market, considering that the wet market is probably a cultural institution that will continue to exist in the Philippine environment. In the pursuit of or trying to combine the concepts of uh, food availability and food safety, we are looking at the possibility of introducing controlled temperature conditions in the wet market. But obviously, this begs the question of who is going to absorb the cost of operating the controlled temperature equipment. I am looking at a possible setup whereby the chillers, specifically the chillers, may be operated by a biomass digester, which operates on the basis of market waste. No? And therefore, at this point in time, the biggest question really is where the initial financing will emanate to actually get this project rolling. It is at this point in time, I have to admit that it is a concept, but I hope that it is a concept in the right direction that will enable the combination or the merging of consumer habits versus technology. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you for your response, Mr. Dizon. Any follow-up response on that?
Miss May, if I may add also. Yeah. Remember in my
Please go ahead,
presentation,
ma'am.
yeah, thank you. Remember in my presentation, we have a TWG on food safety and education. That's actually the intention of government to provide awareness to consumers that in terms of having safe food, we need to ask or demand for food that are stored properly in cold chain, not those that are uh, going to market that are not chilled. They just are there in the market being bought. But of course, in terms of the price, I think there's no much difference in the price of those meat products, for example, or fish that are stored in cold chain, and those that are in the wet market that are not stored properly in cold temperature. So I think there needs to be extensive awareness campaign for consumers that really, in terms of food safety, we need to promote and encourage the use of cold chain. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your answer, Director Echage. I think that also addresses the question on how to promote frozen products to low-income population. So increase awareness of these kind of products. Okay. The second question is for DOE, for Director Aquino. What preparation has been done by the government to prepare the power supply considering the critical depletion of Malampaya gas in 2022 to 2024, and how the rate will be affected, particularly the cold storage industry?
Yeah, thank you for that question. In terms of what the government is doing, as mentioned, if you're taking a look at what we have been pushing, we've introduced a lot of policies in support of renewable energy. We've seen in the past decade that renewable energy is already cost competitive and comparable to conventional energy sources. So in the coming years, we are expecting more renewable energy capacity to come in at rates that are very reasonably priced. On top of this, we're also leading the charge in terms of having uh, more options. We've just issued the liquid natural gas policy, LNG, to supplement our indigenous energy resources. We continue to push for the exploration and development of other natural gas fields, such as apart from Malampaya. So those are the things that the government is doing on the supply side. On the demand side, I did mention in my presentation that the focus of the DOE is really working on energy efficiency. Um, Having these technologies, the efficient technologies on hand, having the right design, having the right tools, having the right practices will spell the difference also in ensuring that we meet both portions of the demand supply equation. So those are the things that the government is doing to ensure that moving forward there will be sustainable energy and affordable for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Aquino, for that response. I think this is a follow-up question also because it pertains to energy labeling, eco-labeling, or energy labeling. It's also from Mr. Figueroa. So the question is, how significant is eco-labeling or energy labeling of products on top of the assets used in production in the government campaign to reduce continuously ozone-depleting substances and mitigate global warming?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. With respect to that, the particular eco labeling, as they say, that's not yet the case. What we do have is on efficiency, energy efficiency labeling, how it's used. So what we've done is that in the Philippine Energy Labeling Program, we have incorporated the global warming potential, or GWP. When you do scan the energy labels moving forward, you will be seeing additional information on that. And as we relate to our colleagues from DENR EMB, we can do and amplify their message to the public to choose more efficient as well as products that have lower GWP. So that are the steps that we're taking to address that particular concern. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Director Aquino. And for for DNR, this is not in the Q&A box, but since we're already talking about what the government is doing in terms of promoting more low carbon technologies in refrigeration or the phase out of ozone depleting substances, the question is, anticipating the ratification of the Kigali Amendment, what could be done by the government to support the phase-in of green and low carbon cooling technologies?
Well, at this presently, we have already collaborated with GIZ, who are introducing actually the equipment, or the mostly the split type split type air conditioning that was manufactured by Godrej from India. It is a R290 refrigerant as a replacement to either Portland A or HCFC 22. We are They are pushing it actually, and we are looking forward that there will be a more importation of the air conditioning units using R290. That's on the base of R290. With regards to refrigerators, for information, the Panasonic are now moving forward from for 134A to R600A on the production of domestic refrigerators, which is also which is being introduced already by the Kundura refrigerators. They are already in R600A technology. With regards to other sectors, we are in the, as mentioned before by Director Aquino, we actually collaborated with them on the with regards to the information of the consumers to put the global warming potential in the also in the energy label at the same time. And in the other sectors, there's a lot of as I presented before, which was being presented last 2020, September 2020, in our technological forum on the use of alternatives to ODS. I have presented to you the so far we what we like to share to all the consumers that might be accepted for them on the use of this new alternatives to ODS and HFCs.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Escota. And going through the Q&A box, we also have a question from Mr. Manny Arcilia. So, regarding the palamigan ng bayan, do you have separate containers for chilled, frozen, and for meat, fish, chicken, fruits, veggies to avoid contaminations and differences in temperature set points? Thank you from Manny of Cold Chain Care. I think this is for Attorney De Los Santos.
Yes, May. To answer the question of Mr. Ercilia, yes, there would be separate containers for chilled and frozen products. So, as mentioned, to avoid contaminations, there should be, for example, one container van, one reefer van should only contain fish products, but it would be possible also like that same container van can also be used for chilled products or for vegetables, but it cannot be at the same time.
Okay, thank you, ma'am, for answering that question. Are there any questions from the audience that?
May I ask question, please?
Yes, please.
Yes, my question is for Mr. Dizon. Sir, hearing from all the presenters today, what other support the industry needs that could encourage increased investment in the cold chain industry?
As I mentioned earlier in my presentation, we would appreciate any assistance that we could get from government in easing the process by which investors, or stakeholders in the cold chain industry can navigate their way around investment, actual investments, and minimizing the confusion in compliance with regulatory impositions that are made by different government agencies. If we could strike a balance between regulation and reasonable implementation, I think it would create a very significant effect in opening up the industry to new investments. Also, we have been discussing with the Board of Investments the possibility of making representations for the agribusiness sector to be allowed greater leeway in accepting foreign participation in the industry, because we feel that opening up the industry to foreign investments could also help the industry by way of being able to absorb technologies and good practices that are available in different parts of the world that could be brought in here if we were allowed to partner with international entities.
Thank you, sir. Maybe Ma'am Raquel, can we have some say on the concern of the private sector in terms on the side of the government?
Yeah, thank you for that, Sir Dizon and Hilda. Actually, what Mr. Dizon is mentioning is about on foreign participation, because recently we just noticed that cold chain is actually a public utility, and therefore limited there should be a limited foreign equity of, I think it's only 60%. I mean 40%, because it should be 60% Filipino and 40% foreign. So we already asked our legal service to study on how we can address the issue, because right now there's a move to, probably it's already discussed in the Senate, the Public Service Act. There's a review of the Public Service Act. So I'm not from the legal team, so I cannot really discuss it thoroughly or in detail here. But we are working on it with our legal team on how we could address the issue on foreign investments in the cold chain as public utility. Yeah.
Thank you, Director Ichage. I also have another question for Director Aquino. In terms of the energy efficiency law, what are the implementation challenges and that has been experienced, and what could be done to address them?
Yeah. In terms of the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act, I think there's really a misnomer that it's an additional burden. There are reportorial requirements, there are certain obligations being imposed, but these are actually, we view it as opportunities. For example, the concern with respect to getting the technologies to improve cold chain, we're taking note of that particular input coming from Mr. Dizon. We'll see if we can bring in energy service companies, for example, or ESCOs to help existing players to improve and make investments on that regard. In terms of the challenges, really is getting the word out and bridging the gap from the misconceptions. Again, the reason why this law, EEC Act, was passed is really to make us more sustainable. If we are efficient, in the practices and in the investments that we do, we relieve the pressure in terms of supply, and then we make ourselves really on the path to, energy sustainability and helping the overall sustainable development goals of the country. So that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you for that answer, Director Aquino. And for another question for Attorney De Los Santos about the Palamigan ng Bayan. How can the Palamigan ng Bayan project be upscaled to promote sustainable food cold chains that also propels local economic development in rural areas? Ma'am?
Okay. As I mentioned earlier, originally this was only the initiative of the DOTR. So we have partnered with DOE and DA because we want really to ensure the sustainability of the project. So we will have to work closely with the DA on this one, as well as the Department of Energy.
May follow-up question to Attorney De Los Santos, ma'am. You have mentioned, in your presentation, you have partnered with private sector in terms of they donated the technology for the Palamigan ng Bayan. But my question is, what the other private sectors can be done, other things that the project sectors can be done to help to expand and accelerate the rollout of the Palamigan ng Bayan?
This project is with the targeted beneficiaries are fisher folks and the farmers, but the cooperation is directly with the local government units. So this is more of a partnership with the local government units. I don't know how the private sector can be involved in this activity other than soliciting their assistance through donations of reefers. That's what we did. What we did. We sought donations from shipping lines and associations for a source of this refrigerated vans. But it's a good question. It's something that the technical working group can look into.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Attorney De Los Santos. And we have another question from Kopo Ann. Hi, Mr. Dizon. What is your recommendation for supermarket owners that owns equipment using R404A or 507? And where can we seek technical assistance in order to select the most viable solutions for retrofit or even new installations? Thanks. So this is for Mr. Dizon. Sir?
Thank you for the question, May. But I have to admit that that is a question that is also going around in my mind at this very moment. And I think that I would defer to the gentleman from the Department of Environment and Natural Resources to provide us the answer to that question.
Yes, that's also
Well,
what I thought. Sir Escota? Sir Escota,
yes,
please go ahead.
yes. Actually, the 404A and 507A are still allowed on the use for the refrigeration or for the cold storage, or even for the transport refrigeration. It is still allowed. So there's still a time for them to plan when they are going to change the technology. Since as of now, our HFC, as I mentioned before, the HFC or the CCO for HFC phase down is still under review on the part of the DNR policy, but we're still hoping that will be as soon as possible to be approved, since we are already in a target to freeze our baseline consumption by 2024. By that time, we should have already a quota allocations. But for the use of 404A and 507, you have a lot of time to think about what will be your alternatives for the HFC or for your refrigerant being used right now. Because as you can see in my presentation, our pace down is through importation. That is our consumption, is not on the use. So even we are on the plan to phase out or the phase down already the 404A or the 507 by 2024 to reduce the 10% reductions. The end user on particular equipment using 404A and 507 can still use their equipment, and since um, there's still stock that will be coming in, we just reduce the importation. So the uh, the 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 servicing for your equipment can still last a long time until such time you already want to change your technology to low global warming potential technology. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Escota. So as long as it is available in the market in the Philippines, it's still allowed because there's no local production of this kind of substances, and the face down is really on the imports.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
okay. In terms of where they can seek technical assistance in order to select the most viable solutions for retrofit or even new installations, I think I see Mr. Dusek raising his hand. Mr. Dusek, would you like to answer that question?
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jan from Sheco. If I may just add regarding the possible solutions or alternatives for retail, for supermarkets, what we see both globally and in Asia Pacific is the uptake of two solutions for supermarkets. One is based on R290 propane refrigeration, both the plug-in freezers and showcases, and water loop solutions. One of them is actually, as you may know, installed in Manila, in Philippines. And the other alternative for supermarkets when it comes to natural refrigerants, low GWP solutions are the CO2. So CO2 is not yet running or not yet demonstrated on the ground in Philippines, but there are stores in Indonesia and Malaysia that use this technology. When it comes to, that's actually one of the purposes of the hub, to be able to demonstrate and bring the industry together to show how the technology works, to organize trainings and demonstrate regarding maintenance and other aspects. So these two, or these solutions I mentioned are available increasingly more, and we believe that this year, next year will be the time to bring the industry together to actually see the technology either running on the ground and organize several trainings for those who are interested in being more familiar with this technology. Thank you.
Thank you for that response, Mr. Dusek. We also have another question from Mr. Arcilia. Question for Mr. Escota of DNR. Is 425A allowed replacement for 404? Thank you, Manny.
Yeah, I think so. But so far, most of our 245FA has been used for home blowing agent. So far, I'm not familiar for the 245FA on the use of refrigerators, but there's already a report from the importers that they're also using for refrigeration, the 245FA. However, 245FA still has high global warming potential, so it might be also be to schedule for phase down. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Escota. We also have a question that has already been answered from Mr. Arcilia as well. Is there an effort to educate the ordinary end consumer on the benefit of cold chain to the food they buy? Currently, consumer perceive warm produce to be fresh and better than frozen or chilled. This will boost the food safety, food security. So to answer that, Director Echage said, with respect to the implementation of the Philippine Cold Chain Industry Roadmap, it is one of the key action agenda of the Interagency Committee tasked to oversee the implementation of the roadmap, and a specific TWG on food safety and education has been formed to be headed by either FDA or DA to address the issue. Of course, DA and FDA have also their respective programs on food safety initiatives. Thank you, Director Echage. So I think, yeah, that's the questions. Those were the questions in the Q&A box. Are there anyone from the audience who would like to ask a question live? The floor is still open. Okay. Going once, going twice. Okay, so far I think that's all in terms of the questions for the forum. Okay, so let me share again the questions we had before we started. To see whether we've been able to answer it through the presentations and the discussion. Okay, so our questions earlier were the following. What are the government's policies, plans, and programs that will have an effect on the development of the cold chain industry? How can these policies support the industry in leapfrogging to low carbon technologies? What are the gaps and opportunities? And how can collaboration be increased among policymakers, implementing agencies, and the industry to ensure low carbon development in the cold chain industry? So, all the answers that we had, all the presentations and the discussions lead us to one conclusion, that we are now treading the road to zero HCFC by 2040. As we wait eagerly for the ratification of the Montreal Protocol, the country has been enacting policies aligned with its goal. We welcome the Kigali Amendment, which combines the phase out of substances that have high global warming potential with energy efficient cooling technologies. This is aligned with our climate goals on lowering emissions and at the same time presenting economic recovery opportunities and job creation. Aside from working on the phase out of HCFC, we should also be talking about the phase in of new and better low carbon technology alternatives in the cold chain. We have two newly created laws that would define the development of the cold chain industry. We have the RA 11534, the Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentives for Enterprises Act, or CREATE, which presents a menu of incentives that will cover various sectors, including the cold chain. We also have the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Law, which requires energy utilization reporting with the goal of promoting energy efficient technologies, especially in energy-intensive sectors such as the cold chain. As Director Aquino put it earlier, the government is poised to push for renewable energy to meet the energy needs of the sector. Both these laws will have an effect on the cold chain development industry of the country. The Palamigan ng Bayan project is a government initiative that can serve as a model of showcasing good practices in cold chain development that features opportunities for strengthening food security and local economic development, especially in rural areas. It is a feat worthy to be replicated and upscaled. The newly created, in terms of collaboration, increasing collaboration among policymakers, implementing agencies, and industry players, the newly created technical working groups on logistics is a welcome development in terms of increasing collaboration of policymakers, implementers, and industry members, spearheaded by the Board of Investments and with membership among the CCAP, the DA. I think DOE is also included in that, as well as DNR, and everyone involved in the logistics sector in terms of regulation. I think this can hasten the reforms much needed by the cold chain industry. There are various projects and initiatives that support cold chain industry's transition to low carbon and green technologies, and one of that is the Global Partnership for Improving the Food Cold Chain in the Philippines, which will support initiatives and demonstrations of new technologies to be showcased in the industry, as presented earlier by Engineer Garibay. So those were the things that we've learned today as we uh, as we went on the discussions and the presentations by our esteemed resource speakers today. I thank everyone in the audience for joining this discussion, especially those who presented their questions in the forum. If you have questions that were not covered by this discussion, all the resource persons have flashed their contact details at the end of their presentation. So I'm hoping that you were able to get it. If not, you can always keep in touch with us, or you can visit the CCI-Hub website, CCI-Hub, uh, ccihub.com.org. Okay. I also thank the speakers for their invaluable contribution to this dialogue between the industry members and other colleagues from the government. So thank you very much, um, Mr. Dizon from SICAP. Thank you, Director Echage from the BOI. Thank you, Director Aquino from EUMB. Thank you, Mr. Escota from DNR. And to Attorney De Los Santos from PPA. Thank you so much. Thank you to Engineer Garibay as well for explaining what this project, the Global Partnership for Improving the Food Cold Chain of the Philippines, aim to introduce in the coming months and in the coming years. So that's all, folks. Thank you so much for being with us today. I hope you have a good day and see you again soon in our next forum or meetings. Goodbye.
Thank you, May.
You.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Stay safe.